Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be talking about the newest album from Everything called A Fever Dream. So here's one of the more exasperating things I've had to experience and reconcile within myself as a music critic. Hearing a lot of music that is certainly good, certainly passable, certainly agreeable, but it's just a shade away from true greatness. And at least to your ears, you could hear the exact change they could make to get there, and it's just not really materializing, no matter how much you might want it as a critic. You might like the band, you might like the ideas they're trying to explore and their themes, you might like their experimental progressions, but it's just not assembling in a way that connects with you on a deeper level. And for Everything, they didn't start there. They might have had a knack for catchy melodies and willfully kind of oblique writing that walked right on the line of insufferable, but between some of those truly awful synth choices and the caterwauling of their frontman, Jonathan Higgs, their debut album, Man Alive, just did not connect for me whatsoever. And then something kind of weird and interesting happened. The band got better, streamlining their sound, punching up the groove, and taking their lyrics into territory that was still odd, but a shade bit more accessible all the same. Arc, that was a good first step. Get to Heaven in 2015 was even better, damn near on the cusp of greatness. And yet, every single time I would go back to that record, I'd feel oddly distant from it. It just wasn't clicking for me. The hooks were better than ever, Higgs' voice had kind of grown on me a little bit, and the greater focus on rhythm, that was potent. But I always got the feeling the band didn't always have a firm grasp of their strengths, which lead to distracting non sequitur moments or mixed choices that never flattered the group as much as they really should have. So while there was a part of me that was a little bit concerned when I heard Everything was heading back towards a more conventional sound on their newest album, A Fever Dream, I had at least some hope that it would come with sharper production choices and a little bit more focus overall rather than blunting some of their experimentation entirely. I mean, they had changed up producers yet again, bringing in James Ford, who is most well known for working with Arctic Monkeys and Florence and the Machine, but on the other hand, he's also worked with the last Depeche Mode record, and he was on the last Mumford & Sons album that I don't think anybody likes or remembers, and how much he would guide the sound would be anybody's guess. He's more of a hands-off producer in my books. So okay, what did Everything deliver on A Fever Dream? Well, here's the thing. I think this record, it's fine enough. It's got a brain, it's got the smart framing to place its social commentary and some nuanced context, the complicated rhythms and more progressive angles. They're a little bit toned back, but they do make for some interesting and distinct songs. Some of the experimentation is still here, and overall, I'd make the argument that it mostly achieves what it's trying to do. And yet, with The Fever Dream, Everything remains a band that I just am not connecting with as much as I would like to. And I can't help but feel that it is a step back from the meteor sound they made on Get to Heaven that was so much more palatable for me. I don't think this is a bad album by any stretch, and I definitely see its appeal, but as with even the albums that they've released that I like, I just do not think Everything is my thing at this point. That's all. So okay, I want to start off with the content on this album, because if I was looking for a reason to recommend this for any reason, it would be this. Most because Everything is willing to delve into some degree of nuance in some of the politics and social commentary. And yes, while there is the expected broadside of the current president of the United States with Big Game, I'd honestly say it's one of the weaker songs here, more designed for just cheap provocation than actually making something of a point. Even if when you examine the overarching feel of the writing on the album as a whole, it can make a certain amount of sense why this is here. After all, the title of this record isn't kidding. The past couple of years could very well feel like a fever dream and could inspire that recklessness. Emphasis on fever here, as decisions are made with less and less rationality, and Everything wants to discuss why that is, or try to decode it. And like with a band like Congos before them, they're looking primarily from the perspective of the person who's actually making those decisions. On the song that's most tenuously connected to the theme, we've got the inadequacy complex of Can't Do, which is more rooted in Jonathan Higgs' writer's block than anything in comparison with a band that's doing so well. But then it's followed by Desire, where people who don't know what they want or what might be good for them just take and consume endlessly to try to fill up that void within. And Run the Numbers shows a populace that's increasingly enraged by those condescending down to them, that they just say screw the experts and seemingly vote en masse in a populist bloc. And this is where I think that the politics can get a little bit shaky. Because then we take Put Me Together, which takes an oddly mournful or almost borderline sympathetic tone in the instrumentation to a guy showcasing some very clear xenophobia, which could very well be the root of some of his bad decisions. Sure, if anything, the album has a lot more contempt for those with reckless, undeserved arrogance thanks to social status and privilege, like on Good Shot, Good Soldier, or on the trolls who just spew venom on and offline with Ivory Tower, completely able to escape any sort of consequence for their actions. And yeah, I've got no qualms with taking aim at their nihilistic nonsense, but at the same time, people do possess their own free will, and just saying screw the experts and giving into blind, ignorant rage, that's not an excuse for bad choices and then the consequences that will come off of them, even if a song like the title track makes the seductive appeal of making that decision just to piss somebody off pretty obvious. Now, if anything, I wish this album actually showed more of the consequences instead of just ending on a pretty flimsy, we'll get through this all together note. I guess Night of the Long Knives tries, but that's the establishing point of the album. There's no follow-up. And on the other hand, sometimes these people, they might not even experience these consequences, or even care if they do, or they'll find some other way to blame it. But on the other hand, it's still not really an excuse to show that. One of the reasons why Congos' album Egomaniac actually works so well for me is that it followed through in a way that A Fever Dream really doesn't. But okay, from a conceptual writing standpoint, there is ambition here that I like. And outside of tunes like the title track and New Deep that feel a little bit underwritten, this is a pretty sharp record. There's got some brains here. So why doesn't it work more for me? Well, it takes us to the production instrumentation. And remember how I said I was never really a fan of how everything and their taste in synthesizers? Yeah, definitely an issue here again, because in scaling back on some of those heavier, more complex grooves, there's a greater focus on those keyboard lines and synth layers, and I'm just not a fan of the tones that they're choosing, especially opposite drum work that feels a lot more skittering and unstable than the hammering progressions on Get to Heaven. It's not all bad. The shimmering swell behind Good Shot, Good Soldier takes its time and builds off the groove pretty well, one of the best songs here, and I like the twist to go nearly a cappella on the final hook of that song, but on tracks like Desire and Ivory Tower, it just feels like excess gloss to the synth layers that's being tossed in for more clashing against the sharper guitar line, which isn't needed. And on Desire in particular, it's not exactly a good thing, especially as with that song and Run the Numbers, there actually are some of the few that build some heaviness and groove, a little bit more of a rock side that I like. And yeah, Ivory Tower gets close to the faster drum lines, but just gets kind of overwhelmed until the outro. I wish that was more of the song. But you know, some of this feels intentional. This is a softer, less imposing record than Get to Heaven, and the easiest way to do that would be tone back some of that muscle. It's not like the wiry bass of Can't Do or Night of the Long Knives can't work, but these songs are also front-loaded near the front half of the album and don't exactly compensate for the bleary stab at psychedelia and Put Me Together, or the pseudo-progressive pile-up of the title track that doesn't really pay itself off all that much, and both songs run a fair bit longer than they really deserve to. And the ending of the album, bit of a mixed bag too. New Deep is a glorified interlude with good piano work but little else, and White Whale, it tries to open up for a really potent guitar-driven finale with a couple of those wheedling chords. It almost reminds me a little bit of Muse at points, but it's kind of undercut how brittle it can feel on that low end, and that's kind of common with a lot of the percussion on this album. It's organic, sure, I just wish there was a little bit more depth to it. And yeah, part of this will ultimately circle back to Jonathan Higgs' vocals, and I'm still kind of on the fence about him. Now don't get me wrong, he's got an impressive range, and when he's multi-tracked properly with a thicker cushion of backing vocals from the rest of the band, I can even get behind his falsetto. But I don't tend to find his delivery all that expressive, and this record can get very shrill very quickly. I think one of the reasons I'm more forgiving of Get to Heaven is his choice to stay more in his lower register, because here, going higher, he's often competing with the guitars and the synthesizers, and leads to a mid to upper range of the mix that just feels overstuffed, especially on that title track, which I get they're trying to go for more of a pile-up. I get that's part of the point of this album, that it's got that head-cold feel where it's holding thoughts together can be frustrating and confusing, but you know what? That excuse can only take you so far and ultimately just gets kind of irritating. But as a whole, I'm kind of conflicted on this record, I gotta be honest. I wish I liked the overall sound of the album more to fit in with the writing, but at the same time, some of the issues, they do run deeper in themes than I would otherwise like to admit. I think more than ever, I just say that this is not for me, and it's a bit of an unfortunate step back from Get to Heaven. I wish they would have gone more in the rock direction. So I'm giving it a very strong 6 out of 10 and a recommendation, but a slightly qualified one if you're expecting everything to get a little bit more aggressive, as I was hoping they would. I see fans, I can see them liking this a fair bit, so if you're interested, this is worth a look, but otherwise, again, I think more of it's not for me, but if you're curious, It's worthwhile. Check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. I know a bunch of you guys are coming over from Anthony Fantano's channel. Welcome. If you guys want to get involved in my schedule, so I'm not talking about this in October now that this dropped around a month ago. Linked over to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week, and for the higher tier contributors, you get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there. If you want to buy the record, if you haven't already, links in the description below. And for all you guys who are Everything fans, there's the poll. You can tell me how wrong I am. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.